Good evening, welcome to the Vinyl Head UK channel. I'm Matt, of course, and it's that time of week again. We're going to delve into some download festival memories. We've hit the year of 2013. Can you believe it? We're flying through. I say this every week, but we are. To start from 2004, we're already at 2013. Another good year, not maybe as good a lineup as the previous year. Of course, we looked last week at 2012, which had some fantastic headliners and a fantastic undercard, fantastic lineup across the weekend. I think we've got a pretty solid lineup in 2013. Headliners for me are spot on, including bands that have come back to headline again, and also a small band from Germany who people had been asking for several years, saying, come on Download, come on Andy Coppin, book this band, we need them at Download, we need them to come and blow up Donington with their staggering live show. And they listened, and we finally got them headlining on the Sunday. We'll come on to those, of course. But as always, I say this every week. This is trying to delve into my memory, trying to remember as much as I possibly can. I won't remember everything. This isn't a review as such. I'm not going to go through all the bands across all the lineup and tell you everything you need to know and review it all. I'm just going to try and share what I can remember from, hopefully, for you guys, a nice, enjoyable metal rock weekend at Donington Park once again. I've got my trusty list. I always have it next to me so I can remember who played. I don't want to get it wrong. As I always say, try and keep this as accurate as possible. And I'll go through the lineup and we can hopefully enjoy some memories together. Drop some comments. Don't forget, comment away. Share your memories of Download. It's always very welcome here on the channel to hear from you guys, of course. But, without further ado, shall we dive into our headliners? I think we should. So, as I say, good headliners, solid headliners. For me, personally, very excited about these guys. As I say, two coming back to headline, a brand new headliner for us. Friday, coming back to headline for their second time, was Slipknot. Slipknot, of course, no strangers to Download. We've seen them there several times, working their way up until they got that headliner slot in 2009, I think it was. So 4 years later, here they were back again to destroy Donington. A band who are definitely no strangers to both Download and Donington, Monsters of Rock and all. Well, Iron Maiden coming back again to give us another fantastic headline slot. I think this was a Maiden England tour. I might be wrong. Hopefully I'm not. And then coming for the first time to the hallowed grounds were, of course, Rammstein. As I say, a band that we had asked for several years now. Each year we kind of didn't get them, thinking, you know, are we ever going to get them? Are we ever going to bring in Rammstein? Are we ever going to have this huge pyro show? But there they were, and they did not disappoint. Neither of the headliners disappointed. All solid bands coming in. Looking across the rest of the bill, as we do each week, we look at each headliner on across all the stages. We, of course, had 5 stages again. We had main stage. It wasn't named anything else. The previous year, It was the Jim Marshall stage, and we've had various other stages, other names of people to commemorate. This was just main stage this year. Second stage was the Zippo Encore stage, the same as it was the previous year. And again, as per the previous year, we had the Pepsi Max stage, making up our third stage. Fourth stage, it's changed. It's not the Red Bull Bedroom Jam stage anymore. I'm going to miss saying that. It's just the Red Bull Studio stage. Hasn't got quite the ring to it. I don't know. As I say, I quite like that name. It grew on me. And then, of course, coming back was the Jägermeister acoustic stage, that fifth stage, which saw bands that were playing across the weekend in different slots, coming and doing acoustic shows over on that small stage. I actually went to a set this year on the acoustic stage. I think it was probably my first one that I went to purposely see someone play. But yes, headline-wise, let's have a little look at who we had. So Friday, 14th of June. It was a wet one. Slipknot, of course, on main. On second stage, we had Blackstone Cherry doing a headline slot. Again, no strangers to Download and to Donington. This was their first headline slot across the weekend over on the second stage. I'm a big Blackstone Cherry fan. I've talked about them at length here on the channel before. Slipknot, Blackstone Cherry. I see Blackstone Cherry, I guess, fairly regularly. They're not strangers to tour in the UK. They're here fairly often. They're pretty big in the UK. Up against Slipknot, who maybe I don't see quite as much. I had to plonk for Slipknot, which is a shame. It's always a shame when you look and you see those clashes and you're like, oh man, come on. What can you do? You know, it's a festival. It's going to happen. Howlfest. I'm just going to go off a real quick tangent. Howlfest recently announced its 7-day festival. That would be clash crazy for me. There's like 350 bands across the 7 days. There's a good like 150 probably that I want to see. Imagine trying to work out the clashes there. I know they do the two main stages and whatnot and kind of, you know, so they try and avoid clashes, but they still would be clashes with other stages. That would be a nightmare. We're just lucky we just have however many bands and not 350 across 7 days. Third stage, Pepsi Max stage, we had him doing a headline slot there. Fearless Vampire Killers were over on the fourth stage, and We Are the Ocean were our acoustic stage headliners over on the fifth stage. Saturday, 15th of June, Iron Maiden, as already discussed, on main. Enter Shikari, stepping up onto a headliner slot over on second. I think that would have kept a lot of maybe not quite the metal hordes happy. I think drew a big crowd still to see Enter Shikari. The Hives were back and headlining third. Last Witness on fourth, and then Devin Townsend. That'd be pretty cool. I don't think old Heavy Devi was actually doing a set anywhere else across that weekend. No, so even cooler to see Devin Townsend, who, you know, pretty big name really, coming and doing an acoustic slot. Again, shame he was up against Iron Maiden, because I think I probably would have fancied going to seeing that. Sunday, 16th of June, Rammstein, the Germans, over on main. Second stage, Limp Bizkit coming back. They'd already done a main stage slot at Download. They were meant to be the original headliners at the very first Download in 2003 and pulled out. It would have been them and Iron Maiden. But here they were back doing a second stage headliner slot. I think that would have been a pretty cool show to go see. Satyricon over on third, which is pretty cool for extreme metal. To see a band like that headlining the third stage. The following year on third stage were three very interesting headliners from the more extreme side of the metal world, which we'll come on to next week. I'm quite excited about talking about those. But yeah, Satyricon headlining third. Sonic Boom 6 on fourth, and Heaven's Basement over on the acoustic stage on the Sunday, rounded off that. So yeah, pretty cool headliners across the board. You know, nothing would have pulled me away from those main stage headliners that year. But, you know, it's good to know that if we didn't have someone that I'd want to see on Main, my options were covered. If we take Main out of the equation, I think Blackstone Cherry, Devin Townsend and Limp Bizkit would probably be where I would be found. Nostalgic with Limp Bizkit, bouting out those Chocolate Starfish tracks. You can't go wrong with that. But there we go. We do what we normally do. We go through who I saw, try and dig out some memories and talk about what I remember from the sets, from the bands that I saw. The weather. The weather was more on the bad side than the good side. We had patches of sun coming through. There was a couple of bands I remember watching in the sun. Korn was one of them. But we did get a lot of rain as well. Which, you know, through sort of 2004 till about, I don't know, 2010, I would say, we had a good spell of sunny downloads. And then from 11, not so much 12, but 11 through to like the last couple of downloads, we had a lot of rain. But you're outdoors, we're at a festival, you know, the weather is at its elements. We have to live with that, you know, unless you want to go cram into one of the marquees, into the tents. You can't really escape it and the mud and 90,000 people churning up that site. But yeah, we did get rain on the, well, across the weekend, really. I think it did pick up a little bit as the weekend went on. I think Friday was the worst, I think, of the days. I think we had some rain leading up to it as well. But let's kick off on the Friday morning, where we will start. So, the first three bands on, I'll cover all three as I did see them. I won't go as far to say I'm a fan, really, of any of these three bands. Not massively into them, but I think it was a pretty important morning, or early afternoon, shall we say, for British metal, as the first three bands opening up main stage were Rise to Remain, Architects and Asking Alexandria. Now, whether you like those bands or not, I think that's important to recognise that was a good thing for British metal. These were bands that were starting to push through on the sort of, I guess, to coin an unofficial phrase, the new wave of British heavy metal. Of course, maybe we could call it the new wave. Of course, if we say the new wave of British heavy metal, we think of the 80s. We think of, you know, like the Maidens and who else? And Diamond Head and Tigers of Pantang and maybe not so much Priest, but, you know, bands of that era coming through. Saxon, of course, was another one. But we were starting to see at this point British metal opening up. It was probably led more by Bullet for My Valentine, who of course did play this day as well. But we were starting to see a push through. I've covered before as well the more extreme side with Trigger to Bloodshed and bands like that. Who else have we spoke about? I'm just going to run through and try and remember who else we've spoken about. Said about Trigger to Bloodshed. We've actually played several times, just scrolling through very quickly. But bands in that ilk anyway. The more sort of extreme side, Annotations of an Autopsy were another one. You know, talked about that more extreme side of British metal coming through. You know, we are relatively known for the extreme side, bands that we've produced such as Carcass and Napalm Death, Cradle of Filth, even obviously the Doom side, if you go as far back as Sabbath, but you know, Cathedral and Paradise Lost. Bands like that, you know, we've always been known for stuff like that. But other than sort of that sort of mini wave of extreme British bands coming through in recent years, we didn't really have a push through too much of British metal bands that were sort of being recognised in a bit of a bigger circles. Architects are the one from those there that have really come through. They had a #1 album not too long ago, which is great. Whether you like Architects or not, that's great for British metal and the British scene, British rock, you know, to have a band like that recognised with an album that's gone to #1. Of course, they've gone on to do pretty good things themselves. We've had a lot of bands that have kind of, you know, been around but never really pushed forward a little bit further. Architects definitely been one of those. But I think that was important. It was good morning to recognise that the British scene with metal is alive and we're still producing good bands in the scene. Rise to Remain were there, of course, because the year before they were cancelled altogether. With that awful weather that we had on the Friday morning, the arena was in a bit of a state, high winds, heavy rain. The organisers were very much sorting out the ground, making it safe. And Rise to Remain and Cancer Bats got cancelled. Cancer Bats went on to play elsewhere that weekend, but Rise to Remain didn't. So I think it was a very cool thing to invite them back, to allow them the following year to actually open up the main stage. As I say, Architects were on after that. They've definitely been the one of those bands that have pushed a little bit further and been recognised for their music and their work, which I think is a very good thing, whether you like it or not, or like them or not. And then Asking Alexandria, who have, you know, I think they probably could have pushed a little bit further had they not had the problems with the vocalist. Is it Danny Worsnop, something like that? You know, he's had his issues and stuff. At one point, you know, they were a band that a lot of people spoke about. I never really understood them. I watched some of their videos. I saw them live, of course. And it just looked like very sort of trendy, which is, you know, kind of a weird sort of word to use to describe it. But the look of the band, it seemed very like choreographed moves, the way that they were headbanging and way that they would sort of do their thing on stage. It looked very sort of worked upon. I like a band that gets lost in the music but is spontaneous with what they do, not sort of where they're doing the exact same thing sort of each and every gig, where it's almost choreographed. If you've seen Asking Alexandria, you'll kind of probably get what I mean if you watch some of their music videos. But it was still important sort of morning to see that British metal is alive. And of course we have Bullet later on, who actually sub-headlined, even above the likes of Korn, which showed that, you know, British metal is in a good place. Definitely in a good place. And as I say, we've always sort of had Maiden and Priest and Saxon and bands like that. And then, of course, as I've mentioned, the extreme side, we've always been known for, with grindcore and, you know, bands like Cradle of Filth and Paradise Lost and, you know, all that sort of thing. But it's good to see new young bands starting to push through. After that, we had an American band who had been around for a while. I guess you could call them veterans. And that was Papa Roach, coming back for another main stage slot. And it very much was a greatest hit set, I guess. That typical festival set that I always speak about. You know, Last Resort. Between Angels and Insects. Getting Away with Murder. Dead Cell, which I always like to hear. So yeah, all the stuff that you kind of expect to hear. I remember Jacoby the front man, who's always pretty wild anyway, that is a hyped up man. That is a guy with a lot of energy to kill. I remember him coming down to the crowd, which wasn't unusual. He'd come down to the crowd in ever sets that we'd seen Papa Roach do. But he found this like huge muddy puddle right in front of the main stage and just rolled in it and absolutely caked himself in mud. Because apparently that's rock and roll. But, you know, it was kind of funny to see him do that. You know, I think of a few singers who would never in a million years do a thing like that. But, you know, fair dues. We're all having to put up with the mud and the wet and bleh. Why not join us? Be one of us. Fair play to you, man. So, yeah, he went and just caked himself in mud. He went full camouflage mode. And then back up on stage. And it was a decent set. You know, a lot of songs that you know. Obviously, Last Resort, you're going to sing along with that. I think everyone knows that song. From, you know, if you're my age, from your teenage years, definitely. And then after, again, a lot of these bands now from sort of Papa Roach onwards are kind of Download veterans at this point. Another band that we'd seen many times at Download were Down without the load. Phil Anselmo and his supergroup were back to do, yet again, another Nola heavy set. It seemed that when they played Donington, they liked to do a lot from Nola, which is arguably the best album by Down. It's a fantastic album. I always forget how old it is. It was like 95 that album came out. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago that they released it. But, you know, I've said it before. I'm going to repeat myself on a lot of these things that as we go through bands that have played, you know, quite a few times already. Phil Anselmo knows how to grasp the audience in the palm of his hand and work them. He has so much control over a crowd. It's unbelievable. And again, a Nola heavy set, Lifer, Bury Me in Smoke, Hail the Leaf. Just heavy. You know, we have Architects and Rise Remain and whatnot who are heavy, but not in a down heavy way. This is a different type of heaviness. I can't remember. So when they did Bury Me in Smoke last time at Donington, they brought out Ghost. They do this thing where they pass their instruments over to the crew or to a different band, and they play out those last riffs of Bury Me in Smoke while the band sort of, you know, does their thing, throws the plectrums out, sticks, and Phil does his, you know, what he does, and then they go off. I can't remember them doing it. If they did do it this one, I cannot remember who did it. Ghost did it on the one before, but I can't remember who did it on this one. But I always enjoy seeing Down. It's a band I really like. You know, we're always going to see a legend with Phil Anselmo, Pantera. Legend. Of course, they're all big names in their own right with their bands. I love seeing Down. It's just riffs, it's just heaviness, and you can bang your head and just love every second of it. You can't knock it. And then, this was kind of controversial. Korn were up next. They dropped down from their sub-headliner slot that they kind of, them and Deftones seemed to make their own. Deftones, every time they play, seem to be a sub-headliner, as do Korn, bar maybe that year when they were on second. Oh, well, oh no, actually, I tell a lie. There's been a couple of times that they've moved away from that sub-headliner slot, because they've done headliner and second. I think they've sub-headlined second as well. Was that to Motley Crue? I can't remember now. But here they were, and it was controversial because a lot of people argued that they should be above Bullet. Now, of course, there is some art to where a band features on the Donington lineup, on the Download lineup. A lot of people, I think, you know, ultimately, the organisers need to sell tickets. And to sell tickets, you need a band that draws on their shows. So, you know, a band that has never done an arena tour is not going to be a headline act at Donington. And I think some people need to realise that, because whenever you see the social media pages of downloads say, you know, who would you like to see headline in 2023 or whatever year, and then someone comments and says, I don't know, who should we pick out? Amon Amarth. Great band, Amon Amarth, but they're never going to headline at this present moment because it's a little bit more niche and they're not a band that's going to sell out at this moment. Not to say they ever will or never will, but they're not headline arena acts. Not at this point. And so I think people have to remember that there's some other, you know, some small band that sort of midway up third, and then someone says, hey, should be headlining. Yeah, it might be your favourite band, but you got to think about the bigger picture. This is why we get the bands that we do headlining. But the argument was Korn should be above Bullet, but I think, you know, at the time Bullet were doing the arenas, which they still are. You know, doing arenas, they were selling out pretty much most of these arenas. They're on a big wave, and so they're going to be a draw. Now, Korn are always going to be a draw. So it kind of was an interesting one to hear what people thought about that. And a lot of people felt that maybe it should be the other way around because of a legacy with Korn as well. Bullet and then Korn, and then, of course, Slipknot. Plus, you know, going with that sort of old new metal tag of bands kind of from the same era, you know, Korn came a bit, you know, a few years before Slipknot, but, you know, sort of tagged into that new metal subgenre. If you're a fan of Slipknot, you're probably a fan of Korn. If you're a fan of Korn, you're probably a fan of Slipknot. But it was interesting seeing that. But Korn were there in this position. Head was back finally. You know, we'd seen this random guitarist who kind of stood at the back of the stage next to Ray Luzier, kind of behind the amps as such. But here he was. Head was back after playing around with Jesus for a few years. He, of course, found religion. He cut ties with Korn. But here he was back. So we got almost the classic lineup, bar the original drummer. Of course, we had Ray Luzier, who I love. He's one of my favourite drummers. So I'm not going to complain about that. But to see Head, Fieldy, Monkey, and Jonathan Davis, that's a pretty cool sight. See Head back and rightfully back in Korn doing what we all really want him to do, and that's play guitar in a metal band rather than preaching about religion. They open with Blind, which I've seen them open with, I've seen them close with. Wherever it is in the set, it's going to amp you up. Hearing that ride bow, you know, and then the riff coming in and building, and then, oh, you're ready. It's going to explode whenever they do it. If they open with it, if they close with it, if they play it 6 songs in, if they play it 26 songs in, the crowd is always going to explode for that. Of course, we got a normal Korn set where we get snippets of other things. We didn't get the Pink Floyd that we have before. We didn't get the snippets of Metallica that we have before. And the sun came out for it, as I said. I mentioned it earlier. We got some sun during Korn, which was cool. Rather than rain and mud and blah. I don't think they were on a specific tour cycle at this point, so we got a lot of material covering a lot of different albums. There was a band that played the next day, who I'll talk about shortly, that played pretty much everything from the new album. But no, Korn didn't do this. We split across. I don't know if it was my favourite Korn set that I'd seen in terms of set list, but just to see Head back and, you know, hear him playing Korn and look and see Korn as we pretty much know it was a very cool thing. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing him again next year at Donington. We hope that Fieldy is recovered and better at that point. Obviously, recently it's come out that he's took a step back from the band to sort himself out and, you know, get better. So we hope he's back by next summer. because yeah, he's integral part as head is. So we want to see these guys. And then of course Bullet sub-headlining. We'd seen Bullet plenty of times working their way through the stages at this point across the years at Donington. Now, I'm going to say I've watched some footage back, not that long ago actually, of Bullet playing that show. And then I watched some footage of them from 2019 playing Wacken. And of course, we have a new, well, he's not new really now, but a different bass player. And of course, we have a different drummer. And I think the difference in Bullet with those two guys on drums and bass compared to Bullet on this show was such a step up. They sound so much better. I don't know the bass player's name. I think his first name is Jamie. I might be wrong there. But he is fantastic vocalist as well. He's kind of like, it's a parallel with Trivium, I find. I think there are a lot of parallels between Bullet and Trivium. The bass player for Bullet now kind of has that role that Corey has for Trivium. He does a lot of the sort of the growly vocals and the more metal vocals, while Matt Tuck will do the clean parts, a bit like Matt Heafy for Trivium. You don't really hear Matt Tuck do the sort of screamy bits, but I mean, God, this bass player's voice is so good. Far better than the old bass player's voice. And he brings so much more of a presence. And then, of course, Jason Bold, who's come in for Moose on drums. Now, I'm biased. Jason's a friend of mine. I've known Jason for many years. He taught me drums. I've worked with him doing some tech work and various other things. I've got to know Jason pretty well for the last, 15 years or so. So I'm always a bit biased, but I try not to be. I try and be impartial. But it was great seeing him get the Bullet gig, and he is a monster drummer. I've sat in many a room while Jason's played drums, whether it's just me and him around his house watching him drum when we've done stuff or through the tech work, and he is incredible, absolutely phenomenal drummer. And to see him get the Bullet gig was great. Obviously, he'd done Pitch Shifter, which another great British band, more of that sort of electronic drum and bass sound to it as well, but a great band nonetheless. He'd done This Is Menace, which was a nice little project he did with Mark Claydon from Pitch Shifter, with different guest vocalists on. He'd done various other things and then filled in for Moose and then got the permanent gig with Bullet, which was very cool. Quite a proud moment to see Jace doing what he loves and on a bigger scale once again. But he is a monster drummer, and I think he makes Bullet sound massive, as does the bass player now. And watching back footage from this set, it's more, I think Bullet are a lot more mature as a band. We talked about this with Trivium a couple of weeks ago. Trivium, in fact, with the 2012 set, Trivium felt like they had matured and their sound had matured, and I think that's the case now with Bullet, with Jason and I think it's Jamie on bass. But yeah, not so great this one. I've seen Bullet with Jason and that a couple of times, and they sound so much better with them, so much more mature. The songs sound massive, even the older stuff sound massive. But yeah, but this show not so much. I'm kind of glad the lineup changes have happened, but yeah, that's what I think of it anyway. Slipknot. You can't go wrong with Slipknot. They were back. They'd proved themselves from their first headline slot back in 2010. A lot of people were unsure whether they could step up to a headline slot after doing the sub-headliners and sort of lower slots, but they proved everybody that doubted them very much wrong. And they were back, and there was a sense that they belong here now. This is a headliner that we now have. They belong here. There was no doubters. We knew they could do it. We knew they absolutely destroyed it. And they were back. I think we had lost Paul Gray at this point, so it was obviously slightly different than the last time we saw him at Donington. But yeah, I mean, they had the sort of grey-white boiler suits on for this one. You know, we've seen them in black and red, but these were quite cool. These were kind of the old school looking boiler suits from back in the day, which was very cool to see. They open with Disaster Piece, which is one of my favourite Slipknot songs, mainly for that sort of heavy as breakdown at the end. I love that part. And from them opening with that, you know, it's just right, game on. They're here to level Donington again. And I mean, they were up against some serious headliners as well across the rest of the weekend. So, you know, they're a lot to prove, I guess, in that sense, that they belonged with Maiden and Rammstein. And it's just intense. Every Slipknot show you see is intense. The barrier broke a couple of times during, I think, nearer the start, and then more towards the middle of a set, the barrier went. So we kind of had to stop and let the guys sort that out and make sure everybody's safe. Of course, we saw that with Rage Against the Machine a couple of years before, with the barrier going and people needing to take a little bit of a step back. But yeah, just intense. I love the white boiler suits. Fantastic headliner. We've seen him come back a couple of times since headlining, and just every time it's just intense. I've said it with a few bands, you don't see a bad Slipknot set. You don't see a weak Slipknot show. You really don't. And that round up Friday, we do what we always do and look across the board and see what else we had. There's some decent bands across the other stages, actually. Opening up second stage was Monster Truck, which is a band that I've really gone to become a fan of. They're actually discovered through download, a band that I saw, not this time, but a band I saw on Main and was like, I really like this. And I've gone and got their records and got their albums since, and enjoy seeing them. I'm pretty sure they're back next year. I might be wrong. I think they're on the lineup for next year. Deer on Grey, who are huge in Japan. I haven't really heard much about them or from them in a long time. Uriah Heep, Dragon Force Europe, Volbeat, Three Doors Down, Go Go Bordello, who I didn't realise were as big as that, to be as high up as that on the second stage. There's some, you know, pretty decent bands on before. I never really realised Go Go Bordello were that big. Maybe I'm missing something. Was it a reunion show? I don't know. Let me know if you know. And then, of course, Blackstone Cherry, as I say, who I would have gone to see had it not been Slipknot. Blackstone Cherry do play the UK a lot. They tour the UK a lot. They do download a lot. So, you know, I kind of wavered towards seeing a band that I don't see as regularly. And I think it would be a mistake to miss a Slipknot headline show. But you got to make those decisions sometimes. Third stage, The Sword. Of course, everybody probably saw supporting Metallica on the Worldwide tour. Teresa's back again, Motionless in White. Converge. I didn't realise Converge played. That's cool. And then Him. Fourth stage, nothing really for me. Zico Chain, not bad. We've seen them on Main prior years. Other than that, nothing too much. Same again on the acoustic stage that day. We had We Are the Ocean headlining, but yeah, nothing really to grab my attention there. Let's jump on to Saturday. We kicked off with UFO, which I have a feeling Maiden had a big say in that one. I think Iron Maiden do have a fair bit of power. I know that one of their things is that nobody else plays whilst they are playing, so the other stages, headliners finish before Maiden comes on. I think that's one of the things I've read that they require or ask for. But I think they have say on the lineup to a degree. Obviously, they don't pick each band that day, but they definitely, I think, ask so, like, for any sons and daughters. So usually when Maiden play, you see Lauren Harris somewhere on the lineup on the same day and sort of things like that. The Indian band Parik Rama, who played whichever year it was, 07, when Maiden headlined. I think that was a Maiden pick. And I feel like UFO could have been one of those. Of course, Maiden usually have Dr. Doctor playing before they take the stage. And of course, you know, open the day with the band that plays Dr. Doctor, and of course that's UFO. So I feel that they had a part in that. I've never really been a UFO fan. I know Dr. Doctor obviously, so cool to hear that live. Seen them a couple of times, saw them down in London at a festival as well, but not a huge fan, so I can't really comment on what they played or if it was a good set by their standards. Young Guns I did not see. Black Star Riders I did see. Of course, doing their sort of mix of their own stuff and Thin Lizzy thrown in. We were at the point now with Black Star Riders that we were getting more of their own material rather than just a load of Thin Lizzy covers. We still got those. We still got Jailbreak. We still got The Boys Are Back in Town, Whiskey in the Jar. All the ones you kind of... The main songs of Thin Lizzy you'd expect to hear, they were still playing. I believe they came in late. I think it was, if memory serves, I hope I've got this right, I think Buckcherry were originally due to play and had to pull out, and that's where Black Star Riders were brought in as a replacement. Not a bad replacement, you know. Either way, I'm not too fussed if it's Buckcherry or Black Star Riders. And then, Mastodon we're after. Now, this is a band that I spoke about earlier who, you know, were on an album cycle and pretty much played the entire album. Not in, you know, order as we've seen other bands do. But, yeah, The Hunter. And they played pretty much every track, bar, I think, Blood and Thunder, was off The Hunter. So they were heavily shoving that one down our throats. Now, I've spoken before about Mastodon. I love Mastodon. They're one of the bands when I was at school, when Leviathan came out. That is still one of my favourite albums to this day. I love that. I used to drum or try and drum along to that, and don't think I'd ever succeed too well matching Brandela. But I love Leviathan, I love Mastodon. When I was at sixth form, anyone that would listen, I would waffle on about Mastodon until I was blue in the face. I'd go and see them, I got to meet them. Amazing band. They've gone a bit more proggy, a bit like Opeth, they've gone more down the prog route. But obviously in their set, we're still going to get those early heavy tracks. Stuff off Remission I love, like March of the Fire Ants, Mother Puncher. Amazing tracks. And of course, you know, anything off Leviathan, I'm going to absolutely want to hear. But Mastodon, I think, should stay inside. I hate to say it. I've seen Mastodon several times outdoors at festivals, not just at Donington. And I've never enjoyed them outside massively, but get them in their own show inside and they are on fire. And I don't know why. I can never put my finger on why I think they sound so different out than they do in. I just don't feel they're a festival band. Another band like that is Dream Theater. But I think that's to do with the fact that if you've only got a 45-minute set and your songs are like anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes, you're not going to get that story of a set that a band like Dream Theater can tell. Dream Theater need like a 2.5, 3 hour set most nights to cover a decent set list and sort of tell a story, because their music does tell a story in a set list. You get the heavier passages, you get the instrumental passages, you get the softer ballady passages, and it's like you ride the wave of it. So they're another band that I don't think translates as much in a festival setting. But yeah, Mastodon, I just can't work out why, and it's a shame. I remember seeing them a show at the Institute in Birmingham. On the same album cycle, so on the Hunter tour, and they leveled the place. They were incredible. The set list was massive, and they played so much stuff off of Hunter, but then also so much stuff from other albums because they had a longer set, and it was incredible. And yet, see them at Download on the Hunter tour, and I just couldn't gel with it as much. If you didn't like the Hunter, it kind of sucked. I don't know why you wouldn't like the Hunter, because it's a good, solid album. But it would suck because you'd listen to everything off it and then get Blood and Thunder thrown in token song at the end there. So you'd have to wait through. But I don't know. One day I hope to see Mastodon at a festival and be like, there it is. That's the one I've been waiting for. But yeah, it gels inside. It's really weird. It's very odd. After Mastodon, we had Alice in Chains. Now, at this point, Alice in Chains had William Duval as a member of Alice in Chains. When they played back in 2006, this was kind of, it was classed as a reunion tour, but at the same time, William Duval was just sort of a vocalist to sing the tracks. It was more of a reunion for the other guys within the band. But obviously they needed a vocalist to sing the vocals. Whereas now William Duval was very much a member of Alice in Chains. And, you know, we all kind of knew who he was. They put albums out with him. And we knew, you know, who this guy is. The Download show in 2006 was one of their first shows on the festival run with him. So a lot of people wouldn't know who William Duval was. Probably a lot of judgy people up against Lane. You know, we're always going to compare. We're probably not going to let him be himself. We're always going to look and compare him to Lane, as, you know, people do. Which, yeah, quite a few years have passed and we were more settled with William Duval and we weren't going to judge him. He was himself and he is the singer now for Alice in Chains, and we respect that and we enjoy what he puts out. And they put out some really good albums with him. There's some real heavy tracks. They did a Looking in View off I forget what the album title is, but a Looking in View. Go and listen to that. That is heavy. I always think that Alice in Chains was one of the more heavier bands from that grunge sort of grunge scene. Spoke about them on the Clash of the Titans tour. So you had Slayer, Anthrax and Megadeth, and then you had Alice in Chains opening up. Like, man, that's a pretty big deal for this band from the grunge scene, you know, where the other bands in that scene are like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and that. But then you've got Alice in Chains from that scene thrust onto an opening slot for three very big, thrash metal bands. You're like, you know, can Alice in Chains hold their own? But I think there's some really heavy moments in Alice in Chains' music. Like I say, a Looking in View. Go and listen to that. The riffs are so heavy. We, of course, got some stuff off the new album. Like Stone, which again is a super heavy track. That's real heavy. But, you know, we'd get What You'd Expect, Them Bones, Down That River. We've got Rooster, Man in a Box. Again, your typical festival set that you're going to hear mainly the stuff that you know and you're going to want to sing along to. But again, I always like to see Alice in Chains. I've covered, of course, their opening record on the channel. So go and check that out, of course, and hear me talking all about Lane and his incredible, amazing vocals. After Alice in Chains, another band that we were very familiar with seeing, and unfortunately the last appearance at Download for this band, and that was Motorhead. who were there to do their typical Motorhead set. And Lemmy doing his thing. They actually brought Filthy Animal Taylor out on stage. He didn't drum or anything, but he came out a couple of times in the set. He sort of stood and waved at the crowd and whatever, which was cool. I've spoke before about the last ever time I saw Motorhead, they actually brought out both Filthy and Fast Eddie Clarke. And they stood there with Lemmy and took the bow with Lemmy along with Mickey D and Phil Campbell. And that was such a cool moment to see that iconic three-piece sort of original or most known, I guess, lineup of Motorhead, and then of course the current Motorhead lineup at the time. To see those five guys together, but yeah, to see Filthy Taylor is always very cool. Never got to see him drum or play or anything. But yeah, they were on the, I think, let's try and think this one through. I think they were on the World Is Yours tour. And they opened at this point with a track of that, but then they went into Damage Case and then Stay Clean. And then I think they did, that's really testing my memory, Metropolis and then Over the Top. So 3 out of those 4 songs, probably my 3 favourite Motorhead tracks: Damage Case, Stay Clean and Over the Top. Over the Top is immense. What a song. Just that pure rock and roll, up tempo, in your face. They did a DVD for a German show in about 06 or 05 or something like that. And that's one of the best versions of Over the Top on that. It's just so raw and just pure Motorhead. Amazing. But Damage Case I love, and to hear that, you know, we didn't maybe need the opening track to be a new song, because we just want to hear the old classics that we love. But yeah, unfortunately this was to be Motorhead's last appearance at Donington. I think it was. Obviously Lemmy passed away not many years later. There we go. Bit of history right there that we got to see. We didn't really know we were seeing it at that point. Sub-headlining, so after Motorhead, we had a band that I was unsure about what we were going to get, and that was Queens of the Stone Age. So another kind of, a bit like Rammstein, a band that we kind of called out for a while to come and play Donington. We got Josh Homme with Them Crooked Vultures. So back in 2010, they kind of headlined the main stage because we had AC/DC on after, but on their own stage. So they were kind of the final band of the day on main. And that was, of course, Josh Homme on vocals, John Paul Jones on bass from Zeppelin, and then Dave Grohl on drums, of course, Nirvana and Foo Fighters. But here he was back with Queens of the Stone Age, which it was their one and only appearance at Donington as Queens of the Stone Age, which is a shame. I'd like to see them back. I feel that they're not a Reading type band, what I would class as a Reading type band. So I've spoke about bands like that before with Bring Me the Horizon and Shikari and, you know, bands like that. But they seem to do Reading more than we get them. Download. Since we've only got once. But I don't know. I was expecting a lot of newer material, which I'm honest, I'm not massively familiar with a lot of their more recent material. The first 2, 3, 4 albums is the stuff I know well, not so much later stuff, and I was kind of skeptical, thinking they were going to do a lot of newer material, and I was really pleasantly surprised that it was more of a festival set rather than you know, promotional set, if that makes sense. They're loud as sin. I saw them at their own show in Birmingham, and it's one of the loudest bands that I've actually seen, which I'm not complaining about. I love it loud. Motorhead. That's why I love Motorhead. So loud. But they did a more festival orientated set. Obviously, no one knows actually. They played fairly early. Everyone kind of expected that last or encore, but yeah, they played that quite early, which caught everyone off guard. First It Given, Sick Sick Sick, Little Sister, First It Giveth. All of those we got, which was cool. I didn't think we'd get half of those because of newer material, but we did. And I really enjoyed the set. It was really cool to see him. I like Queens of the Stone Age. I'd like to see him come back. I'd like him to maybe do like a second stage headliner slot. I think they'd fit perfectly into that position up against whoever they're up against. I think that would be a really cool idea to have them back. But, you know, it's down to the band, it's down to the booking and everything. They may not want to do Download again. They may just stick to doing Reading and festivals like that. But I really would like to see a good second stage headliner slot from Queens of the Stone Age. I think that'd be very cool. But then we got our main stage headliners, and that was Maiden, back once again on the Maiden England tour. This was the year that we were all stood there waiting for Maiden to come on. You could hear this kind of noise in the distance. I don't know if they announced this was going to happen. I think it caught a lot of people off guard and by surprise. But there we were, waiting for Maiden to appear. And all of a sudden, very low, coming from behind the main stage over our heads, was that Spitfire flyby, which was cool as anything to see. It came really low over that main stage, right above us, and then it circled and did a couple of flyovers. And that, of course, was not coincidence. That was by Maiden, and it actually kind of cued them coming on. They opened with Moonchild, and I think to this day there was a missed opportunity. Wouldn't it have been cool to have that flyover just as Aces High started? You know, I read somewhere that Bruce was actually in contact with the pilot so they could cue it up to come on. I've read that there somewhere, but just as they kick into that up-tempo start of Aces High to get the flyover come over, then would that not have been amazing? I think it was a little bit of a missed opportunity, but nonetheless it was very, very cool to see. How many bands could you say open their set with a Spitfire flying over the crowd? As I say, this was Maiden England tour. The set was very good. I'm quite particular with which tracks I like to hear during a Maiden set. I very much have my favourites, and of course, Maiden change up the set list quite a lot. You don't always hear what you expect to hear. I remember one year they didn't even play Run to the Hills. But I do change it up. Speaking of Run to the Hills, they played that and Number of a Beast actually pretty early into the set, which was cool. And then the encore that year had my two favourite Maiden tracks, I think back to back, which is Aces High and The Evil That Men Do. They are my two favourite Maiden tracks. My third favourite Maiden track is probably Children of the Damned, which I don't think we got that night, but obviously we have in other years. But it was, for me, a great set list, you know, just to hear. Normally I expect to hear one of Aces High or The Evil That Men Do. I don't ever expect to hear both. But to hear both back to back, I was very happy Matt that night. And again, as I touched on earlier, no other band were playing, so we got a humongous crowd because everybody is there watching Maiden. Well, everyone who wants to, of course. I'm sure people would go back to their tents or just not be too bothered. But the vast majority of the Donington faithful were watching Iron Maiden. And again, seeing some footage back not long ago, the crowd looks massive. It looks so good. And this was definitely one of the more memorable Maiden sets for me. There was one, which I think was the year that we all got trench foot in the horrible weather. It was a little bit, I think that was actually the year they didn't play Run to the Hills. This was a few years later, which we're coming cover in upcoming weeks. But yeah, Iron Maiden, one of the best that ever lived. And that was Saturday. We'll go again through who else we had. I don't think second stage was quite as strong this year. This day compared to the Friday and the Sunday. But we had Heaven's Basement, who of course were doing an acoustic set the next day. Catatonia, they're a band that stands out. I kind of wish I'd gone to see them. I like Catatonia. Thunder, probably doing their 95th farewell tour at this point. Jimmy Eat World, and then Enter Shikari, who did put a very decent crowd, seeing the footage and the highlights. A nice alternative for people who aren't really into Maiden, don't want to go and see Maiden. And it looked a pretty good set. I've never really been into Enter Shikari all that much, but it looked a good set. Third stage, we had Earth Tone 9, Bury Tomorrow, Gaphonic, who had seen in prior years, Cavell Attack. Never really got into Cavell Attack. The only real time I've seen them properly was they were the support for Metallica on the last world tour, or at least for the UK and the European legs anyway. And then the Hives, who are coming back download and doing their thing that the Hives do. So, fourth stage, really not anything on there at all that I'd want to see. A lot of the bands I haven't actually heard of on there. And then fifth stage, Devin Townsend headlining. That would have been really cool to see. He is a phenomenal musical mind, is Devin Townsend. I don't think he always gets the credit he deserves, but he is just insanely intelligent when it comes to music. Such a incredible mind, and his music is spectacular. His solo stuff really, really is spectacular. Go and check that stuff out. Go and watch his Albert Hall show. It will blow you away. And that we have Saturday. Let's roll straight on to Sunday. Started over on main stage with Sacred Mother Tongue, who had seen a couple of times open up. I've seen them open up second. I think they'd done main before. I can't remember. Not really a band I'm into. Cancer Bats were on after. Again, I think it was quite cool of Download to bring them back. The year before, they were due to play second on the Friday on main, and obviously that rain and wind that we spoke about that cancelled Rise to Remain, took Cancer Bats with them. They did come out and play during Billy Talent's set on main later that day and just did Hail Destroyer. And then they went on to headline the third or fourth stage after Gallows that evening. So they did at least get to play. But I think it's still cool to be brought back and do the slot you were scheduled to do. Pretty much all the stuff you'd expect to hear from Cancer Bats. Then we went to the acoustic stage. This was actually my first trip. I'd been past it. I kind of seen people as they played as I walked past. But this was the first time I purposely went to see a band. And the band I went to see were a band who I believe were based out of London. I might be wrong on that. Called the Gravel Tones. The Gravel Tones are a two-piece. Think of a more sophisticated White Stripes. So we have a guitarist and a drummer. The drummer's name is Mikey Sorbello, and he is phenomenal. And I love going to see the Gravel Tones because of him mainly. They put out some good tunes, but Mikey Sorbello's drumming, absolutely world class. Fantastic drummer. And they were doing an acoustic slot, which I thought would be just, you know, like the drums, but just acoustic guitar or maybe just percussion. But it weren't. It was essentially like an electric show still. And we got down on the barriers. A cool picture that Gravel Tones put out on their social media, and I'm just on the very edge of the photo. You can just see me on that barrier checking them out. And they got a decent crowd, you know, seeing them on their own stuff, on their own tours. And yeah, it's not, I haven't heard them do anything for a long time. I believe they're still going, but I haven't heard anything from them for a very long time, which is a shame, because during this sort of time period, they were a really great band. And I was pleasantly surprised it wasn't just an acoustic guitar and some percussion. It was a good show. From there, we went back to Maine. We did not see Coal Chamber because I have no interest in seeing Coal Chamber. It meant a lot to a lot of people, seeing that reunion with Des Fafara and Coal Chamber being back. But for me, just had no interest. I wasn't really into that sound with them during that whole new metal era. Never a band that caught my attention. Five Finger Death Punch were on after those guys. And they're one of those bands that kind of their sets merge in together a little bit. So I don't remember huge amounts. I think they opened with Under and Over It. And I think this is a year that they brought a load of kids onto stage. I think they had to kind of calm down a little bit, because the last time we saw them on Maine, they tried to encourage most of Donington onto the stage with them, and they had the sound shut down. So I think they had to behave a little bit. And they did bring people on stage, but it was a bunch of kids, which, you know, I think is cool to see the future generations like rocking out to these bands and not listening to manufactured X Factor garbage. But yeah, it was quite cool to see. Nothing too memorable for me on that set. Nothing that really stood out. At this point, we ventured off to second and third. I'll quickly run through, I think, who played Maine that we didn't see. So Parkway Drive were on after. Parkway are a band who I think if they carry on the trajectory, I can't get that word out. If they carry on their course and their path, is a band that I think could fit into a headline slot one day. They've headlined at Bloodstock. They've headlined or done big slots, at least at Wacken and other festivals. Have they done a second stage headliner here, Donington? I can't remember if they have. Half of me is saying that they have. I'm just scrolling through real quick. Yes, they have. They have. Yeah, I think they could probably push up to a main stage headliner down the line. Not a fan, I would say, of them. I think if I sat down and properly gave it time to listen to it, I'd probably enjoy it. But I've never really had the urge to pick up a Parkway Drive album and stick it on and listen. But yeah, the show is pretty spectacular from bits that I've seen, and the fact that they are doing headliner or big slots at other European festivals. You know, they're doing big shows in the UK. I don't see why maybe down the line we could see them pass up into that slot. Stone Sour were on after those guys, and then the Gaslight Anthem. Didn't see any of those, but I thought I'd just cover them playing. Did go to second and saw Rival Sons, who I'm a big fan of. Rival Sons kind of, when the initial first album came out, Pressure and Time, a lot of people dubbed these guys as the next Led Zeppelin. That put a lot of expectation on a band. Any band that gets called the next Led Zeppelin, there's a lot of expectation there. They never got to, or probably will be, the next Led Zeppelin, because I don't think there will ever be the next Led Zeppelin, because Led Zeppelin was such in a higher league than any other band. I don't think anyone would ever get to that stage. But a band that nonetheless have put out some really fantastic albums over the years. And this may have been the first time I caught them at Download. I can't remember. But I'd seen them a few times. They got some funny support slots over the years, which a lot of people haven't been always as happy about. But they've spread their music out far and wide. I actually saw them support Judas Priest, of all bands, who sound absolutely nothing like Rival Sons, or Rival Sons sound absolutely nothing like Judas Priest. And then, of course, they were the support for Black Sabbath on the End tour. So a lot of that tour that Sabbath wrapped up with, Rival Sons were the opening band, which again is a very odd choice to me. And then Rival Sons are also opening up for Aerosmith when they come back and do their European stuff next year or the year after. So they've got their music out, but I really like them. Jay Buchanan's got a voice to die for. He's such a fantastic vocalist. You can hear sort of the influences of people like Robert Plant in his vocals. But I'm glad they never kind of went, Greta Van Fleet and tried to be Led Zeppelin and let those comparisons and those sort of comments go to their heads a little bit and alter their sound. But yeah, sort of nice to hear a bit of rock, not hard rock I would even say, but just nice to hear some just nice rock on the second stage mid-afternoon. We went over to Third after this and we caught the end of the Red Fang, who are a band that I've never really picked up their stuff to listen to, but when I have seen them live, I've been really impressed with those guys. I caught the back half of their set in the third stage and it was really heavy and I was really enjoying it. And then that Mastodon show I spoke about in Birmingham on the Hunter Tour, they were the main support. That was a cool bill that night. That was Dillinger Escape Plan, Red Fang and Mastodon. Or maybe the other way around, Red Fang, Dillinger and then Mastodon. But again, Red Fang at that show were really good. I don't know why I've never sort of found the time to sit down with Red Fang's material and listen to it, because the bits that I've seen live I have really enjoyed. We didn't go for Red Fang, we went for who was after Red Fang, but yeah, catching that back half, I really enjoyed it. Who we did go to see was someone that I was probably the most excited about seeing all weekend, if I'm completely honest. Those that have followed the channel will know my favourite band is Metallica. And when this artist was announced, the excitement went through the roof, because it's someone I didn't ever expect to have the chance to see live. And I knew that whoever he was up against would not get watched, because I would be wherever he was playing. And that, of course, is Jason Newsted, with Newsted, his solo project. When I got into Metallica, Jason was no longer with the band. The first time I saw Metallica was 2003, which was in the very early days of Rob Trujillo. So I never, obviously, Cliff had unfortunately died before I'd even born. And then never, was a bit too young to see Newsted play with Metallica. But there he was on third stage, and of course, I needed to be there. I had to go and see Jason. I loved Jason with Metallica. Okay, it's probably arguably the time where Metallica kind of changed the sound and went somewhere very different with their music. Of course, he was with the Black Album, which made Metallica the global conquering band that they are today. But then with Load and Reload, it was a very different Metallica sound. But he brought something to live Metallica, which I don't think we've seen with Rob Trujillo. Rob Trujillo is a fantastic bass player, just like all of Metallica's bass players have been. But Jason brought that edge with his vocals, with his stage presence. He's someone I miss seeing with Metallica on, footage and whatnot. I love watching old sort of Jason era Metallica and seeing him doing, vocals on a lot of the tracks that he did, and just that intense playing that he had. But he was in front of us, and he was doing his solo record, which might have just been called Metal or something like that. But we got the bits of Metallica in the set. He did the Die chant from Creeping Death, which was something that he took and kind of made his own through his time in Metallica. And to just chant out Die along with him and do that passage was intense. And then the highlight for me of the weekend, my favourite Metallica song is Whiplash of Kill 'Em All. That's the best Metallica song, closely followed by Battery. And another song that Jason would take and make his own, despite, like Creep and Death, it not being a Jason era written song. It was a Cliff Burton era song. But Jason made it his own. He'd do vocals on it, he'd do verses. And he did Whiplash that day at Download. And I damn near broke my neck. I've never come away with my neck the next day feeling as sore as I did during those 3 minutes of Whiplash. And I think however many people were crammed into that tent probably had the same thing. There wasn't a person standing still for those 3 or 4 minutes of Whiplash. It gave us Whiplash. And of course, Jason was intense as ever on those vocals. And it was magic. And it allowed me those few minutes of getting Jason era Metallica in front of me, which was a dream come true. I think it would probably be the only time I ever get to see Jason Newsted live. He doesn't seem to be going to be doing any more live stuff really, unless he comes out and does like an odd appearance Metallica like he does, but that's more sort of special shows in San Francisco or wherever. But it was magic. It was the highlight of the festival for me. I went away with the biggest smile on my face to hear him do Whiplash and that small part of Creep and Death as well. And he was right in front. We were on the barrier. He was like feet away. He was so close. And it was so cool. It fulfilled my Metallica needs very much that weekend. I was so happy. And nothing really could have topped it after that. And we went from the sublime to the ridiculous. The rain had come back a little bit. And we went and caught the main stage sub-headliners. And I spoke about this band. And it was 30 Seconds to Mars. And it was one of the least enjoyable sets I have ever seen at Donington. I'm going to stress this because I always try and say I don't want to slag off bands because there's people probably watching that really love these bands. And I don't want to just complain and moan and say how poor they were. But Jared Leto, and I've said about this before, is someone who I think played a part. He is obviously an actor, and I think he acted out the part of a rock star. The word that strikes me most in my head when I think back to this set was ego. From the moment he came out, how he was interacting, it was probably a more female-based crowd than, big, sweaty metalhead dudes. It was mainly a large female crowd that were there present for this. And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. But the way he was treating the crowd and the pandering a little bit, and he brought on females onto the stage, and some of them were quite emotional because, obviously to them this band means a lot. And Jared Leto is, someone they look up to and whatnot, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But the way he treated them and the ego that was put across, it seemed very demeaning how he was at times. And the whole set by him seemed like a feeling of an ego trip by someone that was playing the role as an actor of a rock star. It felt a bit forced at times. And like I say, I think there was a lot of, I'm a rock star, look at me, I'm here, worship my feet kind of feel, which I did not like. It didn't feel organic. It didn't feel natural. It felt forced and I didn't enjoy it. I really didn't, unfortunately. It's not many bands I say this about, but it just was not for me. And I did not see the appeal and I did not like it. After seeing Jason Newsted and everybody else that we'd seen, it's that the fans make these bands. Without the fans, You would not be a band. You would not be successful. You wouldn't be playing Donington if you didn't have a fan base. And every one of these bands that I've listed respect the fan base. They love seeing the fans. Whether you like that band or not, you know, someone like Five Finger Death Punch bringing on the kids. A little bit cheesy, but it's respecting them. The way that Jared Leto was to people in the crowd, or his reactions, or how he was when these people got on stage. It's the full set is on YouTube. I've seen it before. Go and watch back and see what you think. Maybe it's just me, but it just did not seem cool. Coming off such a high of seeing Newstead as well prior, I think probably dented it a little bit as well, but no, not cool, not for me. Didn't like it. But then we only had one more band. That was Rammstein. What a production that they brought. We always knew that Rammstein were going to bring a big production because that's Rammstein. That's like 50% of what we know Rammstein as is pyro and production. Seen Rammstein before in arena shows. You know, we're always getting big production. But just seeing that show and the production that they brought, even without the pyro, was mind-blowing. There was so much that they brought with them, which was amazing. And then, you know, we got pyro galore, as you'd expect in a Rammstein show. You know, all the, I don't even know what you call half the stuff that they did or what they used with, like, during, like, Fewer Fry, with the big sort of mask things that shoot these, like, 20-foot flames out of the mouth. And Till Lindemann with that huge bow and arrow that shot out like flames, and the like, I don't know, like when they set the keyboardist on fire in that massive cauldron with a flamethrower. Like, so much, I don't even know what you call half the stuff that they use, but just amazing show. What a way to top off a weekend. All the stuff you'd expect to hear, as I say, Fewer Fry, Du Hast, Lynx, Kind of Lust. All the tracks, you know, as I say, you would expect to hear. And just such a spectacle. There's been bands I've seen with big stage shows and big production, like Kiss, for example, Motley Crue before. You know, I guess Maiden to a degree. But yeah, Rammstein just in another level. They really are. And I just could not get my head around just the production. And I'm not, as I say, I'm not even talking about the pyro, just the stage, just the production. Incredible. And I'm so glad that we finally got them. It kept a lot of people very happy. People that have been asking for this band for several years. We finally got them. We've had them again since. But my word, what a band. Crazy Germans. Rest of the day, across the other stages, second stage was quite strong. We had Hell Yeah, I'm on a Marth, Ghost. I kind of wish I'd gone to see Ghost. Airborne, A Day to Remember, sub-headlining. So they've found themselves rising up a bit more up that lineup. So second stage sub-headliner slot. And then Limp Bizkit, of course, headlining on second stage, which I think would have been a cool show. Don't know how many people they pulled over Rammstein. Third stage, nothing too much to report prior to, say, Red Fang, Newstead, and POD. Of course, another one of those new metal bands kind of reappearing. Satyricon, which I think is an interesting one, as I say, headlining third stage. Nothing really on fourth for me to report on. Some of those bands, again, I haven't really heard of. And then the acoustic stage, other than Gravel Tones, who I went to see, we had Heaven's Basement, who were a good band. They'd already played that weekend. It was cool to, I guess, see them on acoustic. Kind of tough that they were up against Rammstein and Limp Bizkit and that, but hey-ho. And that wrapped up 2013. Good year. Despite the weather, we had a good year. Good headliners, good undercard, good array of bands spread across the stages that I went to see. But yeah, I enjoyed 2013. I liked it. I hope you did too. I hope you enjoyed this little journey back down memory lane. Again, share your comments. Drop some comments in. Tell me if you were there. Tell me who you saw. Your own memories. Everybody will have different memories. There should be like 90,000 different memories from people. So share them if you will. Don't forget to subscribe. Build the channel up. Go and smash the like button. Go and hit the bell for notifications. Again, I'll be back same time next week where we jump onto 2014, which was an interesting year. We saw a new headliner coming in once again. I spent a lot of time watching headliners on the third stage of all places that year. But yeah, that should be a good one as well. I'll be back same time, Monday, 8 o'clock for Download Festival Memories. Of course, keep checking out the channel during the week for more vinyl content. It's mainly what this channel is about, is the vinyl content. But of course, it's nice to share other musical ventures as well, like these memories. Keep checking out. Appreciate it very much. But until next time, stay safe. And I'll speak to you soon.